Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I am Robin DeLucia, founder and career coach for IMPower Coaching, and I'm going to give you a lot of my tips that I share with my clients. And good news, I'm getting all kinds of good news stories from people that are getting jobs with the help that I'm giving them, either with their resume or their cover letter or their interview skills, knowing their strengths. So we'll talk about all of those things today, and I encourage you to ask questions, which you can do using the chat button. So let's get started. We'll talk about resumes, being authentic about what you're looking for, interviews, how to talk about yourself, where to look for jobs, and then I'll even open it up for questions at the end. Okay, so the first thing that I help clients do is move away from the business jargon and kind of boring language that we see in resumes and application letters. So it's things like saying, I'm a team player, I'm detail oriented, I'm motivated, I'm a hard worker. None of that terminology works anymore. And now we need to share stories and more authentic evidence that you are what you say you are. And that goes on paper and it goes in your interview as well. But for resumes, we want to convey a bit more of what you're passionate about. And I call it the human voice. So as if you were talking to someone. The old way is zombie speak. The new way is human voice. And I'll show you an example. So this is a resume that I have had, and this woman came to me and she was an IT developer. And at first glance, there's nothing wrong with the resume, but we made quite a few changes. And this has now gotten her several interviews and her dream job because she was not happy at one of the employers that she was at. So the first thing I would point out is please don't anyone share your mailing or your home address. No one needs to know, especially now during COVID. We don't care, and you should be able to make that choice of how far you'll commute for a job or not. So take off your home address, your suburb. The only thing you should have is your name, your mobile, your email, and possibly your LinkedIn. And then you should have an overview section, but I help people put bullet points and bold headings like strategic thinking, IT experience, finance, accounting, whatever your industry, whatever your expertise, we need to have those headings. So it's an easy scan for people that are reviewing 100, 200 resumes a day. You have 6 seconds to make a good impression. And these are kind of those general skills descriptors that we want to get away from. It's okay to list the technical skills. I'll show you a good version of the resume in just a moment. And then you go into the work history. I do like that she had achievements, but we want to beef those up and make them more succinct and use numbers if we can. Some people spend a lot of time writing about the responsibilities, and most job titles, we are aware of what that job title did. So we care more about the achievements. And very important, by the way, to have the month and year start and the month and year end for every job, or they'll throw your application out. Now, this is interesting because some of these employers, you don't know what city she worked in. That's really important too, especially Aussies. They're very focused on, do you have Australian experience or not? Even if you don't and you worked in another country, list it because it's credibility and it shows that you're owning the experience that you had. And then she's got a bit of education at the end, which is good. Let me just show you the good version of this resume. Then she's got a whole other section of hardware and software at the end, extracurricular. So this is her resume after we converted it. And it shows you that she's got a human voice introduction that talks about her passion in IT development and the breadth of experience that she brings to the table. We've got those bullet point headings in bold and giving real life evidence after each one of those headings that she does have that experience. She's put all of her technical skills in a table, which is very helpful for HR people that aren't technical. They can scan and see what experience she has. Because she had probably 10 years or more of experience, we outlined that in her career summary, which is also helpful. And then we start her work histories, the responsibilities, the achievements. And I think the responsibilities were important for her because she does a steady state job in IT, and it's so broad that it was helpful for her to split those out on this resume. And the older jobs are not as important, but yeah, to have responsibilities and achievements on each of them is good. And the longer years that you've been in one particular role, the more achievements there should be. If you're only in a job for 6 months, it's not a big deal if you only have one or two achievements, or possibly none, because you were there such a short time. And then we listed her education and qualifications. But you notice the headings are really easy to scan in this new version of the resume. So the employers are always in blue font. The job titles and the time frame are on the same line. She's got the city and country for each role that she did. She's got the responsibilities and achievement headings in gold. So it's just much cleaner to look at, and she's using the same amount of white space, but it just looks better. And this got her callbacks and got her 2 different jobs, I think, since I've worked with her. And then this is a sample of a cover letter. It just talks about, I've previously worked in this area for these big companies. Always mention, name drop if you can, if you have that experience. And then she pasted the exact terminology from the job advertisement into her cover letter. It should be no more than 1 page unless it's a government application, and use their language. Again, making it easy for HR people. I used to be an HR director, so that they know that you tick the boxes of what the key skills that they're looking for. So minimum 3 bullet points, maximum 6, if you can keep it to 1 page. But giving evidence of how you meet that requirement is perfect. And then a nice simple closing statement. You can paste something about the culture, if that's in the job advertisement, into that closing paragraph and say that this matches my natural strengths, and you're done. So these cover letters are actually getting, I would say, when I ask recruiters, it's 50-50 of some people, even at the same company, read the cover letters, others don't. And you don't want to take a gamble. If they're asking for a cover letter, you should write one and send it through. And then to summarize on the resume do's and don'ts, we would keep it to 4 pages maximum, 15 years experience maximum. I find a lot of people don't explain their job gap, so you have to say that you were studying, you were traveling, you were relocating countries, you were waiting for visa approval, for work rights, all of those things, career break, to care for a family member, take time off with your small children. All of those things are acceptable reasons, but we want to explain those career gaps in your resume. 11 font size is great, and there's 2 fonts that I like. It's Arial and Calibri. Don't use New Times Roman. Don't use fonts that are hard to look at, like the newspaper fonts. They're not good. And if you're changing industries, really focus on that front page of your resume. Make it all about your transferable skills and the credibility of the examples that you have, and then start your work history on the second page. Achievements is the biggest thing that I'm helping most of my clients write. And it's so important because you may forget about things that you did, like train a new person, or you were asked to take on a special role, or you were asked to be promoted, because like those are achievements. If you moved on quickly, especially. So don't underestimate the power of some of the achievements that you would have done at each role. And then save a master resume, so you have all the jargon saved in one place. And then if you're a multidisciplinary person, for example, if I'm an engineer, but I'm also a project engineer, they're quite different. Keep a master resume of all those technical capabilities and evidence, and that way you can drop it into the cover letter when you need. I don't recommend having more than one version of your resume. It's just too hard to keep track of. So, two versions of your resume out there while you're applying for jobs is all I recommend. But certainly, if you have more questions about your resume, schedule a 15-minute free session with me. You can go on my website, book a 15-minute time slot, and I'll review it with you. Or you can just email your resume to me, and I do for free a little 5-minute Loom video recording playback for you that you can hear my feedback on your resume. And I think, yeah, photos are definitely a no-no. HR often throws them out, so they're not perceived as discriminating against people based on their appearance. Illegal to ask your date of birth. It's illegal for them to ask you. I got to ask this question yesterday. It's illegal for employers to ask you how much do you make in your current role. So that's a red flag if they ask you. PhDs, people are put off by this. Salary information should not come up in an interview, and it shouldn't be written in your resume. Religion you should avoid, and I think that's it for. Okay, so let's go on to the next topic. So interviews. I've had 3 clients within the last 2 weeks that have been in the same job or employer for the last 10 or 15 years. So it's quite scary because the interview process has changed. And the biggest change is that they want you to have stories prepared of your achievements, similar to what and they'll ask you to tell them about a time when you worked with someone you didn't like, or when you had a problem, you faced a challenge, how did you overcome it? And I recommend people use the STAR platform, and I'll share this methodology with you in a moment. But before we get to those, what I call competency-based interviews or behavioral interviews, there's some key components that you can do to help you stand out. And the first thing is the tell me about yourself question. Don't just recite your business skills and experience. Use that opportunity to differentiate yourself. And I'm telling you, being a previous HR director, when you tell me that you're a mad footy fan or you love cycling or NASCAR racing, it just gives you a bit more human element and shows that you can be vulnerable. And that is what they're asking about you. Where did you grow up? You can include, I grew up in India and I moved here when I was 12. I have 3 siblings that also moved to Australia. So all of these things are okay to respond, as well as, I've been in this industry for the last 10 years. I'm really excited for this role because it could allow me to use these passions or skills that I've been developing. So the tell me about yourself is business and personal. Don't forget the personal, because most people do. And when you add a little bit of personal, it helps you stand out. And the next thing is your strengths. Now, I'm a accredited Gallup strengths coach. I have gone through quite a deep education of the 34 Gallup strengths. So it's an American tool. You can go online, you can find it. You can go on my website, find it. If you want your top 5 strengths, the cost is like $35, $40. And if you want your full strengths, your whole 34 strengths ranked from top to bottom, it's $80. You don't have to do the survey. You can watch my videos and learn about each of the strengths if you follow my strength series. But it's really important that not only you can name a few of those strengths, and this isn't skills, this isn't coding or typing. These are soft skills that you have as human beings, and then be able to give examples of each one of those strengths. So I've just prepped a gentleman on Monday this week that had an interview, and it's for the government, and he was able to recite that he's analytical, that he likes taking the emotion out of it. He had harmony. And he said that he loved to develop people. He had developers. So Those are 3 Gallup Strengths terms, but he put them into his own language and used those in an interview, and he immediately got the tick in the box to go on to the next interview. So when we talk about star stories, it's a way of actually writing and speaking about telling a story of how you dealt with a challenge or a behavioral story. And you should have stories prepared on teamwork, communication, technical, if it involves if your role is technical, problem solving, leadership. So everyone should have, describe a time when you dealt with a difficult person. Give me an example of when you helped bring the team together or solved a problem at work. So everyone should have stories prepared for each of those questions, because you never know which ones they're going to ask. And the STAR framework is set up the situation. It's an acronym for the situation, the task, the action, and the result. And a lot of people tell the story but forget the result. Or a lot of people don't set up the situation part of the story very well. They forget to say what their role was, or what their responsibility was, or how long they were performing in the role, who the other players were. So be able to set up that context. The task is what you were given as a responsibility, and the action are describing those activities that you did proactively to get a good outcome. The result is, the customer was happy, or this person stopped complaining. I had one lady who a customer had thrown cables at her. She was so irate that her phone didn't work. And she was notorious for being a person that called the help desk all the time. And after this situation, this person described this story. She said the result was she was much nicer to me, and she didn't raise tickets as often to the help desk. So that's kind of setting up the STAR. That if you can master that, and there's videos on that particular technique on my website, watch them, learn them, you will be really good in the interview. And the last thing is, you never walk away without asking great questions. And I plead with you not to ask when's the next step or what's the pay. Never ask about pay in the first interview. It's, do you have any reservations about me performing in this role? Or what would you describe as the top 3 challenges? Can you describe this job in your own words? All of these things are very insightful and show that you really care about the bigger picture. So don't waste that opportunity to make the last great impression if you spent 30 minutes, hour with this person. Okay, and now we're going to talk about tips on Aussie culture. I'm always conscious of people that take a job as an interim, because that can now sideline you from the future job that you want to achieve. So if I'm an IT person and I take a job at BP Oil, the recruiters will see BP Oil on your resume. So you have to be really careful about those jobs. Now, if you were at BP Oil, but you were still doing IT, we want to make that clear. And sometimes the job title is unofficial, so you can put it in parentheses. But the bottom line is, in Aussie culture, you are your last job. So even if you did project management 10 years ago, they will put more emphasis on your more recent jobs. You have to give credibility, so it's not enough to just list that you're a hard worker, team player, all those business jargon descriptors. You've got to give proof and give them achievements. So they don't have to be huge achievements. I work with high school students writing achievements. It's, you won an award, you were elected captain of the footy team, or you were asked to represent the school for their open day. Like, there are an abundance of achievements. And so if you're stuck on that, let me know. I'll ask you a whole bunch of probing questions to help you uncover some of the achievement stories. Ask good questions, which are, it's part of the culture in Australia, but not necessarily in other places. So don't be scared to ask some questions. I think people will appreciate that. And persistence, polite persistence. So I had one client who called a recruiter every day, and a week later he was going to an interview, and now he landed his dream job. So persistence does pay off, as long as you always say, I'll call you back again tomorrow. Don't ask them to call you. But yeah, if you go into a workplace and ask if they're hiring, my son got a job doing that. So persistence is good in this country. And interviews, do's and don'ts. Even if you're on a webcam, absolutely dress up. I had a man a couple months ago, he dressed up in a suit and tie and he had an interview with Fuji Xerox, and they thanked him profusely for making the effort. So it helps make a good impression. So definitely dress up if you can. You don't have to wear ties though. That's more for maybe banking, maybe if you're working in the CBD, but it's not required nowadays. Prepare your stories, research the company, look at the website, look at the LinkedIn person, that their profile of the person that's interviewing you. See if you can get any insights on their work history. Talk about yourself, and maybe years ago you used to be much more harmony, but now you actually recognize the signs, and when there's a conflict, you try to address it. Or maybe you were super analytical many years ago, but now you try to take less time in making decisions if they're not as big of an impact. Be yourself. Always send a thank you note if you can, whether it's on LinkedIn, email, text, whatever you can. Don't talk yourself down. Don't misrepresent your experience. Don't forget to bring those great questions. The star pose is, there's a TED Talk by Amy Cuddy, and I'll show this at the end, but you can do the star like they do when they cross the finish line in the Olympics. It's a motion that helps relax your body and help your brain. So I tell the ladies to go into the bathroom, stand in the bathroom stall before your interview and do the star pose. And make sure when you answer any of the interview's questions, unless it's like a super technical interview, you should not be taking more than 2 minutes to respond to the question. So if you think you've lost them, pause and say, I'm sorry, am I answering your question? They will appreciate that. They'll give you clarification, and then you can continue. And don't be afraid just one time to say, sorry, I'm nervous. Because if you guys told me, if I told you I'm nervous today, you would say, people are generally compassionate, so they're not going to go tougher on you when you declare that. And no one loves interviews. It's just not, very few people enjoy job interviews. Okay, and the next topic we will go to is being authentic. So I've met a lot of people that are, I guess I would say they're desperate and they will take any job. And I understand that motivation, but what can cost you that job is by saying, I can be all things to all people. So I helped a man, Gajendra, who was an IT developer, a .NET developer, and he had learner as a strength. So he really hated being in the maintenance team. He would much rather work in the developer team where he could be installing and developing new applications. And the job interviewer, the employer, hired him, and he said, the reason I hired you is because you knew what you liked and you knew what you didn't like. And so that's what I'm talking about. Like if you haven't loved being in the front house at a restaurant, you'd rather be in the back house, that's okay. So name it. And be aware of your body language, your eye contact, your smile. Smiles are contagious. Your posture. And then no waffling, confidence. So fake it till you make it is really true. Okay, and how to convey passion. So a lot of people ask me, how do I talk about myself without sounding like I'm bragging? And it kind of links back to what I've already said of knowing your strengths. So if I told you I'm very organized, I put a calendar on the refrigerator in our home and we all write down our work schedule, who's cooking what meal, what the meals are for the week, that gives you a lot of proof that I'm organized without me bragging. And that's what I mean by that authenticity and having passion. So if I told you that I just love helping women and developing young people, that is much better than saying, oh, my expertise is in women and youth. So it's conveying that passion using just a little bit different language on what makes you excited, what makes you happy. So have that kind of elevator speech in your head and practice it. You can write it, you can script it, talk about your strengths and your motivations and your passions. And that way it doesn't sound rehearsed after you've recited it a few times. But linking your own natural instincts or talents and your passions to the job is so much more compelling. So if I am going for an accounting job, it's like I love spreadsheets. My family makes fun of me because I keep a spreadsheet for all of our budgets, or like whatever links back to the job is really good. An IT guy said he loved tinkering and taking stuff apart since he was a child, and so he went into IT development. So there's lots of examples of talents that relate to your personality that can bring value to the job. That is knowing your passions. And next, these are my top 5 Gallup strengths. And again, there's lots of information on my free advice page on strengths if you want to learn more. Relator, a lot of people have this strength, and it means you like working in a team, you like having friendships at work. Positivity, I'm always checking in with everyone, saying good morning. Arranger, I am organized. I do have a calendar on my fridge. Responsibility, hate to let anyone down. I've done lots of high school workshops, and I volunteer for migrant organizations. So I would never let them down, even though it's my time that I'm giving. If I need to give a webinar for them or come to a networking night. And the last one is woo, which is less common, and I love meeting new people. I'm in the right career, right? And I like going into a room full of strangers. It does not faze me. So that's a bit about my Gallup strengths. Now, this is the chart that has all of the 34 strengths. There's 4 families of these strengths. There's the doers, the people that have the executing talents. There's the influencers, people who know how to take charge, speak up, and make sure the team is heard. There's the relationship talents. They make the team that's greater than the sum of its parts. And the strategic thinkers. They absorb and analyze information to make better decisions. So I'm always jealous of people that have the strategic talents, because all of my strengths are in these 3. My top 10 strengths are in these 3 areas. And that's okay, because I surround myself with strategic thinkers when I need to develop new products for my business or new ways of delivering a workshop. Then I go to my strategic partners that I work with. And the next thing, I should say one more thing. So the reason I really love the Gallup Strengths tool is that if you know your strengths and you're able to use them in your career every day, you are 3 times happier at home and 6 times happier at work. So it's such an impact when people can figure out what their strengths are and then use them to make career choices, conscious career choices. Okay, on the networking, 65 to 70% of jobs are hidden. And what this means is the 20 to 30% here, it's actually closer to 15, are jobs advertised on LinkedIn, Seek, Indeed, and there's a whole bunch more jobs being placed through who you know. So that old saying of who you know is better than what you know is really true. And when I've listed my 14 jobs over my career, 12 of them were not through me applying through a online or advertised job. So it's true. A lot of us are more happy to hire someone through them being endorsed by another friend or coworker. So the networking is so important. And you may think, how am I going to find someone that works in that industry? If you have just regular career coffee dates, like career advice dates, and I know it's COVID and some of us are in lockdown, You can schedule webcam meetings. And in fact, people have more time if they're working from home right now. So it's a good time to be doing this. Hit people up on LinkedIn. I've done this for clients, and I've had some senior leaders say, sure, I'll meet with your client and give them advice about their career. It was somebody in gaming, it was somebody in procurement that I asked. So you can approach people and ask them for their advice. Don't diminish. Your hairdresser might know someone that can help you, or people at the gym, or people that you are introduced to at your kids' school. Network with everyone and have your speech ready. You know, I'm looking for a job. You don't have to say I want this job title. Just say I'm looking for something that allows me to use my XYZ skills that's, you know, within half an hour from home, and I'm really excited if I can learn XYZ. So just having those attributes, people will automatically go in their brain and say, oh, how can I help them? But if you say, oh, I'm looking for anything, you haven't given them enough information to think of ways that they can help you. So, but human nature is people do want to help you. Never ask for a job in those networking meetings. Just ask for advice. People are always happy to give advice, and that will more easily get you a response if you're just asking for advice. Okay. I've talked about the iceberg analogy. So changing faces of employment. The recruitment process is tough now, and I'm sure you know there's a lot of automation, so you want to make sure all of your keywords are added to your resume. They store it in a database, and I have had clients in the last few months that have had callbacks from previous interviews, so don't diminish putting some of those key terms in, but you also need to be networking and calling recruiters. Now, if you call the recruiters, be prepared for tell me about yourself. And remember, you want it to be memorable. And what is your salary requirement? Give them a range. Don't give them a number, give them a range. And if you're not sure what the salary requirement is for the role and based on your experience, go online on my website, free advice page, download, it's under employer negotiations, download the salary benchmarking data for all the jobs in Australia and New Zealand. And you can find your job title and find the range. So if you're new in the role, then you're going to be in the bottom to the average, the middle point for what pay you would ask. And if you've had 5 or more years of experience, then you're in the middle to the top end of the range. And don't be afraid to look at different sites, or even some companies never have to advertise. They just post the jobs on their own website. So be sure to subscribe to some of those websites for the companies that you would love to work for. And also be conscious of, and I know this to be true, a lot of HR recruiters, once they get your application, they like it. They go online and they look at your media, your social media presence. What's your Facebook profile look like? What does your LinkedIn look like? Does it have you in cocktails, clinking glasses with your friends? Does it have political stuff? Does it have, lots of skin showing? So if there's anything that looks distasteful, that could throw your application out. I know it seems unfair, but I know a lot of HR people do that just to help rule out and sift through the final shortlist of people that they're going to bring in for interview. So be very conscious of your brand online and what you post, and make sure that it's not controversial. And then we'll go to some of these helpful job websites. Flex Careers is offering some free webinars right now during COVID, which is quite nice, and they're partnering with LinkedIn, so I would definitely follow them and subscribe to their newsletters. Indeed has loads of hospitality, trade jobs, and government jobs I've noticed on there as well. And then Seek is the norm. LinkedIn I prefer because they seem to have more jobs in a certain category than Seek, because Seek is more expensive to advertise. And yeah, these are some of the other websites. The other one I really like is Work 180, which is ethical businesses that want to promote equality in the workplace. So have a look at some of the companies that are on that website advertising jobs. Beam is all about part-time working moms, but they also place men in roles, part-time roles as well. And Puffling is really cool because it is a methodology of partnering two people to apply for one job and then convince the employer that they can do the job sharing. One might work 2 days a week, one might work 3 days a week. And if you're aligned at the front and tell them that you can get along well and you understand the requirements of the job, that helps you get it across the line. And use LinkedIn if you are looking for any type of office jobs. The trades are not usually on it. I'd say about 50% of education aren't on it, but it is still helpful. You can keep track. In fact, if you're struggling to find connections to lead you to your next job, go look for some of the people you went to high school or university with. They might be great connections now that can introduce you. And don't worry that you haven't kept in touch with them for 5 years, 10 years, because you are frozen in time. There's a TED talk about this. You're frozen in time in how they felt about you when they were around you. So even if you worked with a company, 15 years ago, they remember you as a good worker. They still would love to chat with you and talk to you again. So don't feel bad that you haven't kept in touch. And I think there's a lot of good information. I'm always watching the LinkedIn job seeker tips to make sure I'm current with all of the trends. When you like stuff, and I encourage you to like my post, you become more visible in your own network. And sometimes that just plants a seed with somebody that I'm still here, I'm looking. And it also helps you be well prepared for job interviews. So I can't emphasize enough, if it is an office type job that you're looking for, to really get your LinkedIn profile up and running. And then here are the TED Talks I mentioned. How to get back to work after a career break for Carol Fishman, you can search for. Sheryl Sandberg, I read her book, Lean In. I really liked it, about how us bossy girls made our moms uncomfortable. That was me too. And so I think it's really helpful for people if you struggle in the high leadership roles as a female. And then Brene Brown, Power of Vulnerability, love her. And I think that's one of the most watched TED Talks about a lot of people won't make career change based on fear. And if that's you, you need to watch this video. And the last one is the star pose with psychologist Amy Cuddy. So when you're getting ready for a job interview and you go into the bathroom and do the star pose, it helps relax your brain and make you think more clearly. So she talks about that. And I think that's it. What questions does anyone have? I'll give you a moment if you want to write any. Okay. Is it better to follow up post-interview through LinkedIn or a phone call? That's a good question. You always have to remember that people are so time poor. So if you're going to make a phone call, it would be better if you're just leaving a message rather than having this awkward conversation, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to be perceived as trying to influence them further or add something that you forgot to say to your interview. So I would say messaging, LinkedIn, email, or text are all much better. Keep it very short. You can add something if it was a really great topic that came up in your conversation, but otherwise just thanking them for their time is the best. Phone call is a bit riskier, so I would not lean towards that one. Good question. I had a lady yesterday who had to call a recruiter to ask, this job advertisement didn't have an expiration date. And so I asked her to check, are they still, it was 7 days ago, but she didn't see it at first. And I wanted her to check before we did all this effort that the job was still open. And so the question you can call and ask them is, when does your shortlist have to be completed? So that's another wording for, am I too late to apply for the job? Now, she didn't get a call back. yet. So we're still going forward because it's only been 7 days. But the rule of thumb, if you can, is to get in first or get in last, because when people are sorting through all the applications. But I would say it's better to get in first, because if they find a real great winner, then they kind of stop paying attention to the other applications. So if you can get in right away and really customize your cover letter, have your resume speak to the requirements that they're looking for. I'm hoping you won't have to modify your resume each time. But I prepped this woman for what she might be asked, which is to tell me about yourself. So we went through that speech and what was her pay requirement. So we went through the benchmarking data, and she had a figure that she was ready, a range, don't give a figure, that she could give them if they asked her. Okay, another question. Thanks, Chris. Will employers always check LinkedIn? Yes, if the employer has a presence on LinkedIn, then they're typically paying for some sort of business membership, and they have more information and access to profiles than you and I. So for example, if they pay a premium LinkedIn membership of $10,000 a year for their business, and that gives them, I don't know, maybe 25 job ads that they can use for free, they can go behind the scenes and look at your profile and my profile, and we never get a notification of that. Or they can do searches for certain skills or people that have worked at certain companies. Like, they can do quite powerful searches for people. And for example, people in the cyber security industry are not having to look far for jobs. They're getting hit up. This one mom that was returning from maternity leave, she hadn't even started applying for jobs, and once she started refreshing her LinkedIn profile, she was getting approached by a couple companies, and she ended up getting a job at Deloitte. So yes, they will check LinkedIn, and I would say it's better for you to have no profile on LinkedIn than to have a bad one that shows you in sunglasses or with multiple people in the picture, or it's a cropped photo. All of those are bad LinkedIn profiles. Or if you have typos in your about summary paragraph. So, but yes, they will check LinkedIn because they want to see your writing skills in your about section of the LinkedIn. They want to see your photo, they want to see your headline, and they'll skim your work history. Okay. Well, here's one other question. Are written or phone references as common these days, or only if there are doubts? This is a good question. So I was working with somebody on their resume yesterday, and they had not only the references, they had the name and phone number and title, which is great, but everyone I work with, you should take those names and references available upon request, take it all off your resume. It's a waste of white space that you can better use. And the reason why is because companies have become so busy that they don't do reference checking until after you've done the first interview. And generally, they're paying a third party to check those references because their own staff doesn't have the time. And that means that's an investment. That's a cost to them. So if they're checking your references, they're looking to offer you the job. So if you have letters of recommendation, they're just not entertained. I suppose you can attach them to a job application if it's highly competitive, but it's much more in the control of the employer nowadays, and they will ask for the names and contacts. And you should always give those contacts a heads up of what job you've just applied for, and to expect their call. And that way it can get wrapped up faster and you can start work faster if all goes to plan. I hope I answered that question. So written references are just not very common, and phone references are common. And some companies even use an app to, like, I had to do one for a colleague that worked at Vodafone, and I had to do it all on my phone and rate them on a scale of 1 to 7 on a bunch of behaviors. And I was able to write comments and stuff. But yeah, it's not even done by people nowadays. Any other questions? I'm really excited that you guys joined me today. I appreciate you putting aside the time. I hope you found some useful tips from this presentation. And if you had a win, like if you got a job or you got a call back for an interview or any of my advice, I love you sharing good news stories with me. So I got a good news story this morning from a lady that's been trying for a couple of years to get into an elite orthodontist program, and she's a migrant from Egypt. And she texted me today and said that she got in like 15 minutes before this webinar. So I did a quick video. I said, I can't call you, but I'm so excited. I'm doing the happy dance. So I love good news stories, even if I haven't met you or seen you for a long time. Have a great day, and thanks for watching.